Even though like 20% of my channel has been me talking about Mega Man, I've never really thought of myself as a Mega Man fan. It just wasn't part of my gaming DNA growing up. I was a 90s kid, so Mega Man was always around, but I was more into basic mascot platformers and RPGs than shooters or sci-fi, so he just never grabbed me. It wasn't until a few years after high school, when my friend and now co-writer shoved the Mega Man X games in front of me, that I gave the series a proper shot. And even then, it was mostly curiosity. I bought the Anniversary and X collections on PS2 just to see what the fuss was about. I ended up really liking a few, X1 and X4 especially, but the series as a whole didn't win me over. Particularly the classic games, which I found either infuriatingly difficult or completely forgettable with no in-between. I respect Mega Man as a retro gaming icon, but I've never loved him. Mega Man Legends, though? That's a different story. Mega Man Legends is a game that I just wholeheartedly, sincerely, and unconditionally love. It was the first Mega Man game I sought out not because I should, but because I wanted to. Capcom dangled side-scrollers at me for years and I never bit. But then they came to me and said, "What if Mega Man, but Zelda?" You son of a bitch, I'm in. That's basically what Mega Man Legends is. Mega Man, but Zelda. It was Capcom's first attempt to bring Mega Man into 3D, not just in visuals, but in structure. Instead of carefully crafted 2D obstacle courses, you get an island to explore, NPCs to talk to, dungeons to plunder, and gear to upgrade. The vibe is less arcade action and more adventure RPG. Perhaps not surprising when you consider it was directed by Yoshinori Kawano, a veteran of Capcom's Breath of Fire series. And while Mega Man in 3D sounds like a marketing gimmick, Legends actually commits. No pre-rendered backgrounds or fixed camera angles, this is a fully 3D world that you run around in, fight in, and get lost in. It's clunky in places, sure, but it's ambitious in a way that most PlayStation games weren't yet. And that's no small accomplishment given that reportedly nobody on the staff, except for a single character artist, had ever worked on a 3D game before. Progression isn't about beating themed robot masters for their weapons anymore. It's about scavenging, exploring, finding gear that expands your abilities. You'll pick up upgrades like the jet skates or spring boots, machine parts that Roll can cobble together into powerful gadgets, or buster parts, modular chips you can equip to customize Mega Man's default buster. Only 2, eventually 3, can be equipped at once, but they let you tweak stats like damage, range, or rate of fire to suit your playstyle. Special weapons also make a return, though they're handled very differently this time. Instead of automatically inheriting them from bosses, you'll earn 2 through the story, and up to a dozen in total if you go out of your way to find the right parts. And this is where Roll becomes way more important than in her classic appearances. She's the brains behind your entire arsenal. She builds your special weapons, upgrades them, and even drives you around the island once you unlock fast travel. Meanwhile, the game introduces a currency system called Zenny that enemies drop when defeated, and you use Zenny to upgrade your weapons, buy armor that reduces damage, expand your health bar, or pick up utility items like refillable health packs. There are even consumables that temporarily make you invisible or invincible, which feels closer to something out of an action RPG than a run-and-gun platformer. Balancing your loadout is half the fun. Do you dump your resources into upgrading one tool to absurd levels, or spread it around for versatility? This is where the Zelda comparison really clicks. Legends isn't about precision platforming anymore. It's about exploring dungeons, solving problems with your toolkit, and slowly growing stronger. Mega Man as an adventurer instead of a fighter. And what ties it all together is the game's structure. Outside of a short prologue dungeon, the entire adventure takes place on a single island. You'll explore the surface, talk to people, unlock key items, and then use those items to dig deeper into the underground ruins, which in turn open up new story beats and new places to explore on the surface. It's a neat loop of overworld and dungeon exploration that feels very Zelda, particularly Link's Awakening, but still has Mega Man's DNA. Because if you squint a little, Legends isn't so different from the older games. It's still built around a familiar rhythm, 8 core objectives, an intro stage, and a final gauntlet at the end. The genre shift makes it objective-driven rather than level-driven, but the skeleton of a Mega Man game is still very much intact. It's just dressed up in an adventure RPG coat. The Zelda influence especially comes through in Legends' dungeon dives and combat. You can lock onto enemies by holding one of the shoulder buttons, a feature that feels straight out of Ocarina of Time. Except, wait a second, Mega Man Legends came out before Ocarina? By a year? Yeah, Mega Man was ahead of the curve on Z-targeting. Granted, Capcom's take is a little rough around the edges. You can't swap targets when multiple enemies are on screen, and worse, you can't move while locked on. The second you hold that button, Mega Man's feet might as well be bolted to the ground, which kinda defeats the purpose of a lock-on in the first place. Thankfully, the game has a mild auto-aim even without it, so in most situations you're better off just circle strafing and letting the targeting do its thing. It's telling of how early 3D design was that most enemies are powerless against a player who just runs laps around them. A few bosses demand more precision, like hitting a weak spot for instance, but for the most part, running in circles is surprisingly effective. That leads nicely into the controls. Shifting Mega Man from 2D to 3D was always going to be messy, and 1997 was still the Wild West for how characters should move in a 3D space. Nobody had settled on a standard yet. In Legends, Mega Man can run and jump in 8 directions, quick turn in 4, dive roll left or right, and grab ledges to climb up or drop down. All perfectly functional, though a bit stiff and mechanical. And bafflingly, the instruction manual never even mentions the dive roll, so there's a good chance a lot of players went hours without realizing it was even in the game. I know I sure did. The manual also repeatedly confuses the circle and square buttons, which is just quality assurance at its finest. At first, it feels like fighting the controls is half the game, which is frustrating, but also kind of fascinating. Legends is a time capsule of developers figuring out 3D in real time, like a bizarre missing link somewhere between Doom and Ocarina of Time. Once you adapt, there is a certain kind of charm to it. The camera mostly works, but it's also stubborn. Unless you're using that lock-on button, the camera always stays planted behind Mega Man's back, instantly snapping around whenever you change your heading. That, paired with the slightly robotic feel of his movements, makes things feel less natural than you'd hope. And some design decisions are just plain awkward. To enter new areas, for example, you don't just walk through doors or openings, you always have to press circle, even if nothing's physically blocking the way. I once spent half a minute pacing around a cave entrance before realizing the game was waiting for me to open it. Later, I failed a bomb disposal mission multiple times because the game was so finicky about my exact positioning that Mega Man just refused to pick them up. But arguably the clunkiest part of the package is turning. You can either swivel the camera to rotate Mega Man, or strafe left and right while the camera stays fixed. By default, turning is mapped to the shoulder buttons and strafing to the D-pad, though you can flip that in the options. Considering this game predates the PlayStation's dual analog sticks, the developers were doing the best they could with what they had, but neither of these mappings feel great, and your only real choice is to put up with it. Combine that with Mega Man's fixed running speed, wide turn radius, and slightly floaty jump, and movement never feels fully responsive. It works well enough, but even compared to other 3D action games of its time, Legends comes off as clunky. The sequel would make some strides towards smoothing this out, but here you can feel the growing pains of early 3D design all over the place. On Kattelox Island, the ruins, sometimes called gates, are crawling with biomechanical creatures known as Reaverbots. They come in all shapes and sizes, and most can be handled with your trusty buster. Some, though, bring extra tricks. Shielded enemies that deflect shots, turtle-like ones that need to be flipped to expose their vulnerable undersides, even invisible Reaverbots that only reveal themselves when charging at you, forcing you to rely on sound cues to anticipate their attack. There are even trap treasure chests that greet you with a face full of explosives if you get too greedy. Survival here is supported by a few clever systems. E-tanks return in spirit through the Energy Canteen, which you can expand at shops to increase your healing capacity. Mega Man's health is also buffered by a shield gauge, which can soak up a certain amount of punishment before it breaks. Once it's gone, you'll need to repair it with consumable items or by visiting a save point. And in Legends, your save points are a lot more charming than a simple menu prompt. Mega Man's sidekick Data, the robot monkey. In addition to saving your progress, Data can heal you, repair your shield, refill special weapon ammo, provide hints, or even free items in Zenny if you pick the right dialogue options. He's a cute mascot that doubles as your lifeline. As fun as it can be to delve into ruins, though, the dungeon design in Legends feels a little undercooked. The mapping system, which automatically fills in as you explore, does a great job of selling the idea that you're charting unknown territory, but the special weapons create design problems. Unlike the 2D Mega Man games, where you could switch between all your weapons on the fly, Legends makes you equip just one weapon at a time, forcing you to leave the dungeon and talk to Roll if you want to swap. That one design choice almost completely undermines both strategy and variety. Dungeons had to be beatable with any single weapon, which means they often feel mechanically similar. There's only one major exception where a specific special weapon is required for progression. Otherwise, your loadout doesn't matter much, and the absence of the series' staple charge shot only makes it more puzzling. It feels like the level designers wanted you to use special weapons, but didn't give you the capacity to actually integrate them into play. This problem is compounded by the resource system. Enemies don't drop ammo refills, and even health items are somewhat rare. Energy canteens can only be refilled in shops, and special weapons only through data or these single-use hyper cartridges. Since data never appears mid-dungeon to allow you to save or refill, and with no quick exit feature from dungeons, you're often forced to either finish them in a single go, or make frequent backtracking trips just to resupply. In practice, this means most players just stick with the standard buster, only pulling out special weapons when absolutely necessary. And when you do decide to experiment, you'll notice the weapon balance is uneven. In the classic games, each special weapon had a very specific situational niche. In Legends, they feel more like an RPG arsenal where new weapons simply outclass old ones. Once you've got the Spread Buster or Grand Grenade, there's no reason to use the Grenade Arm or Splash Mine ever again. Why use the Machine Buster or Powered Buster when the Active Buster and Shining Laser exist? Some have situational utility. The Drill Arm opens blocked paths, the Vacuum Arm hoovers up drops, the Shield Arm can topple Turtle Reaver bots, but others, like the Sword Arm, are practically worthless. On top of that, Buster parts only affect combat stats. There's nothing that improves exploration or economy. No faster movement, no bonus Zenny drops, which would have gone a long way in cutting down the late game grind. Fully upgrading every weapon costs around 5 million Zenny, and even on easy mode where Zenny is quadrupled, that grind really drags. And speaking of easy mode, let's talk about Legends' baffling approach to difficulty. Only normal is available from the start. Beating normal unlocks hard, and then beating hard unlocks easy? Alternatively, you can unlock easy by speedrunning normal in under 3 hours, but, why? Now, in fairness, easy mode in practice plays more like a New Game Plus feature, giving you the aforementioned Zenny boost, as well as allowing you to equip the jet skates from the start, and an exclusive Buster part that completely maxes all your stats. I think a big part of the problem here is that they called it easy mode, which makes it sound like a handicap instead of a reward. Worse still, the game doesn't even save difficulty unlocks to any sort of system file. To keep them, you need to beat the final boss, start a new game on a new difficulty without turning off the console, get to the first save point, which takes around 10 minutes, then save and load that file and return to the main menu. It's clumsy, confusing, and honestly not worth it. After playing all 3 difficulties, I can confidently say they don't add much replay value at all. So, while the gameplay of Legends is far from perfect, I think where it really shines, at least compared to other Mega Man titles, is in its story and world design. Being the first fully 3D entry in the series, the developers leaned into the strengths of the hardware and built a cohesive setting rather than a series of disconnected obstacle courses. Most of the game takes place in what's essentially an open world. Granted, it's a small one by today's standards, but it's a sizable sandbox for the time, full of little diversions and interactions. The main objectives always unfold in a set order, but in between them, there's a surprising amount of freedom. You can chat with NPCs, shop for upgrades, or take on side quests that reward you with items, weapons, or even alter minor story beats. Early on, for example, you can jokingly introduce yourself as Hippopotamus to the local shopkeeper, and she will keep calling you that for the rest of the game. There's also a light morality system, where Mega Man's armor gets lighter or darker depending on whether you're doing good deeds or stirring up trouble. During certain boss battles that spill into the city, minimizing collateral damage keeps you in the townspeople's good graces, and in turn ensures some side quests become available sooner. Even if you slip up, though, you can donate to the rebuilding efforts out of your own pocket. The police might ask you to defuse bombs or stop a bank robbery, while the local TV station ropes you into goofy game shows that award prize money and weapon parts. One quest has you helping kids build a secret clubhouse, and the game's longest-running side quest involves donating artifacts to the local museum. As its exhibits grow, so do the crowds, and completing the collection nets you the final part needed to craft the strongest weapon in the game. Capcom clearly put effort into making Kattelox Island feel alive. The island becomes a place you want to spend time in, not just a backdrop for shooting robots. Sure, it's tiny compared to modern open worlds, but the townsfolk are endlessly chatty, and their dialogue updates after every major story beat. Even though NPCs never stray from their scripted spots, the city still feels lived in thanks to small interactive details. Kicking cans through the market streets, adopting stray cats, or even getting run over if you forget to look both ways first. The whole thing feels like if a single Zelda town was stretched into a full game world. And honestly, I'd argue the NPCs in Legends are more endearing than what you'd find in most Zeldas. In a Zelda game, I rarely ever find myself talking to NPCs that aren't involved in a side quest of some kind, but here I was spending hours at a time just talking to people and soaking up the atmosphere, just because I found it all so charming. By the time the whole town shows up to see you off in the game's ending, I realized I'd actually grown attached to them.
It's still active! The reactor's still running!
Great! What about the refractor?
Beyond just creating a vibe, Mega Man Legends also puts a surprising amount of effort into its story. Compared to the classic or X games, it's immediately obvious that narrative was meant to be the bigger focal point this time around. Because your objectives are tied directly to story beats, the game feels more like a cohesive journey rather than just a string of random stages. The developers wanted something with a more anime flair, slightly more mature than the earlier Mega Man titles, hoping to appeal not just to kids, but also to the growing teenage gaming audience of the late 90s. The fact that Legends released on Mega Man's 10th anniversary made it a perfect moment to try something bold. While technically set in the same universe as Classic and X, Legends takes place so far in the future that it might as well be completely removed from them. Outside of a few Easter eggs like the X-Buster, Zet Saber, and a cheeky Dr. Wily lookalike, this is its own self-contained world. For all practical intents and purposes, this is a full-on reboot. Legends takes place in a flooded post-apocalyptic setting where the last remnants of humanity live on whatever scattered islands still remain above the sea. Which sounds a lot like Zelda the Wind Waker, except... wait a second. Mega Man Legends came out before Wind Waker? By 5 years? Okay, more likely, both games were just drawing from the same well, the 1979 anime Future Boy Conan, but still, it's a funny coincidence. In this world, energy is scarce, and powerful crystals called refractors have become humanity's lifeline. Treasure hunters known as diggers risk their lives exploring ancient ruins full of reaverbots, all in search of the mythical Mother Lode, an infinite energy source that could end the fuel crisis forever. Diggers work with spotters, partners who guide them remotely through comms. Our protagonist, Mega Man Volnut, travels with Roll Casket and her grandfather Beryl aboard their airship, the Flutter. Together, they're searching for the Mother Lode and answers about Roll's missing parents. Tagging along is Data, Mega Man's robot monkey sidekick who speaks in chipper gibberish only Mega Man understands. Their adventure really kicks off after an emergency landing strands them on Kattelox Island, where they soon cross paths with the Bond family, a trio of eccentric sky pirates. From there, the plot spirals outward, fending off the Bonds, delving deeper into the ruins, and uncovering the unsettling truth behind Kattelox itself. What makes this work is how immediately likable everyone is. The Caskets have a warm, natural family dynamic, more so than anybody in Dr. Light's family did, and even the villains are fun to root for. The Bonds, led by the ambitious but reckless Teasel, come off less like mustache-twirling villains and more like a sitcom crime family. Their hijinks, from robbing banks to running restaurants to having their servbots bumble around libraries, are consistently charming. Tron and her servbots in particular are such standouts that they'd eventually get their own spin-off. The Bonds are an absolute treat every single time they're on screen. That shift in focus is what makes Legends feel so different from its predecessors. In other Mega Man games, you get glimpses of a bigger world, but it always feels like background dressing, and with each subsequent game it felt like the humans and larger world they reside in became less and less relevant, to the point where Mega Man X4 featured literally no human characters at all. Legends feels like the polar opposite, actually inviting you into its world both through its narrative and through the simple act of exploring Kattelox. As an RPG fan, I love that sense of immersion. I'm not even a huge lore person. Mythology doesn't really grab me nearly as much as strong theming and good characterization does, but Legends delivers both mythos and character. The townsfolk feel like they're living real lives outside of your adventure, and the core cast, both heroes and villains, feel like real families with all the warmth and friction that implies. If I had to sum it up in one word, it'd be sincere. Legends takes the time to slow down and give you small moments that exist purely to build character. The caskets and the bonds form a thematic mirror of each other. Both are families missing their parents, and both are technically diggers, but one chooses honest work while the other turns to crime. And yet, despite their differences, there's a mutual respect. Even when it looks like the bonds have been wiped out, Mega Man takes no pride in this, and is relieved, downright elated when they turn up alive and well later on. In probably my favorite moment of characterization, during one dungeon excursion, Roll calls to reminisce about her first dig with Mega Man.
Remember the first time you went on a dig, Mega Man? I wasn't used to being a spotter, and you ended up getting lost underground for 3 days. Remember? You were lucky that Gramps came to help us. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there.
And later, she casually offers him a slice of apricot pie after a tough mission.
You must be getting hungry, Mega Man. I made some apricot pie. Are you up for a slice when you get back?
You can even give her gifts, not for upgrades or stat boosts, but just because it makes her smile. It's the little touches like this that make the cast of Mega Man Legends feel more fleshed out than pretty much anyone we'd met in the classic or even the X games. Personally, I've also always had a soft spot for Roll's English voice actor. You can tell she's an adult, but she still sells the role of a teenager, with a voice that's cute and spunky, but also exudes the intelligence and warmth that are the character's defining traits.
Roll, they're right on top of us.
I'm on it, Mega Man.
That brings me neatly to the game's presentation, especially the voice acting. Mega Man Legends is the first time the series had anything close to a proper English localization, and honestly, it's more than serviceable most of the time. Because of the genre shift, this game has way more text and dialogue than any previous Mega Man entry. It's not quite as long or script-heavy as a Zelda game, but compared to earlier Mega Mans, this may as well be Skyrim. And unlike the older titles, almost every cutscene and major event is fully voiced. According to Keiji Inafune, the Japanese voice budget alone was about 3 times higher than usual. The problem was that up to this point, Capcom's English localizations were, let's say, rough, and this was compounded even further once voice acting was added to the equation. Most Capcom translations were done not by dedicated English language writers and actors, but rather by Japanese employees and contract actors who were simply capable of speaking English. Both Mega Man 8 and X4 are infamous examples, where the scripts were direct translations with almost no quality control, and the voice direction was done by people who didn't actually understand the language. Ruth Marie Jarman, formerly Ruth Shiraishi, who voiced both Mega Man and X in those games, has since said she was given basically zero context or information about her role, and wasn't even made aware that she was playing 2 different characters. She defaulted to this cheerleading voice since that was all she knew, and the Japanese directors signed off on it because, well, it sounded fine to them.
Dr. Light, what is the problem?
And that's how we ended up with the delightfully awkward dialogue those games are known for. Thankfully, Capcom didn't skimp on the English translation this time. Sometime between Resident Evil 1 and Mega Man X4, Capcom realized that having convincing, natural-sounding English dialogue is actually pretty important when you're trying to sell a legitimate product to customers overseas. And so the localization and dubbing for Mega Man Legends was outsourced to a New York-based recording studio that used established voice actors, mostly from Canada, which is why every now and then you'll hear a little "aboot" or "again" slip through.
Look, I can walk again!
They even found an age-appropriate actor to play Mega Man. Corey Sevier would have been around 12 or 13 when he recorded his lines.
Me? My name is Mega Man. Mega Man Volnut.
So, overall, the voice acting in Mega Man Legends is actually pretty alright. Granted, it can be pretty cloying and saccharine at times. Every once in a while, there'll be a line that has, for lack of a better term, Nick Jr. cadence, where you can tell these actors have experience doing mostly shows made for toddlers.
Diggers travel from one island to another in their flying machines, ever hoping.
But the important thing here is that these are clearly actual native English speakers with actual acting experience, which in and of itself is a huge step up from Capcom's prior attempts. Just don't look up Teasel's English voice actor. That's a whole can of worms. Beyond the acting itself, the English script is a rare highlight. It avoids the stiffness of a straight word-for-word translation and feels like it was actually proofread by someone who actually spoke English. Way to go, guys. Sure, there are the occasional typos, but compared to the likes of Final Fantasy VII, which released the same year, this script feels very polished, which is noteworthy considering FF7 almost certainly had a higher budget. That said, the localization still had to juggle that whole Rockman versus Mega Man branding issue. Any Mega Man fan will already know this, but in Japan, the character is Rockman, or in this case, Rock Volnut. Overseas, he became Mega Man Volnut. The funniest part is you can tell the writers just did a mass Control-H on the text, because here, his weapon isn't called the usual Rock Buster or Mega Buster, it's specifically called the Mega Man Buster. And within the story, Volnut is a baby when the Caskets adopt him, meaning that Beryl genuinely looked at this literal infant and said, "His name is Mega Man now." The English script also has a surprising amount of personality. You'll catch little pop culture nods, some even referencing other Capcom titles like Street Fighter and Resident Evil. And at times, it really pushes the limits of that E rating. There are references to panties being stolen, a woman getting breathalyzed at the police station, and yes, even a scene where Mega Man accidentally walks in on role changing. Nothing explicit is shown, and the English delivery is just awkward enough that it's not immediately clear what's happening, but still, I am shocked this made it through. Of course, a few things were cleaned up. You can't attack animals anymore, and what was a dirty magazine in Japan became a comic book here. It was especially important that Capcom nailed the acting and script this time, because Legends has way more story to tell than fans of the series were used to. The plot itself isn't overly complex, but cutscenes are both substantial in length and surprisingly frequent. They're all done completely in-engine with full voice acting, clearly following in the footsteps of Metal Gear Solid, except, wait a second, Mega Man Legends came out before Metal Gear Solid? By a year? Yeah, Legends was also a bit ahead of the curve on that one, too. But what really stood out to me after spending time with these cutscenes wasn't just that they were ahead of their time, but the specific way they were presented. Despite being full 3D, the camera almost never moves. You'll get a slow pan here, a cautious dolly there, but rarely anything as flashy as a swoop or dramatic zoom. If the scene needs a new angle, the game usually just hard cuts. It's as though each scene was storyboarded like a low to mid-budget TV anime, where minimizing movement is a way to save both time and money. Which is strange because with a 3D game, you can move the characters and camera however you want. But here you'll regularly see scenes where the only thing moving on screen is a character's mouth, another hallmark of anime cost-cutting. Other games with 3D cutscenes weren't like this. Metal Gear Solid, despite its characters having completely static faces and scenes being infamously packed with expository dialogue, almost always had some form of movement happening. Characters would bob their heads as they spoke, they'd gesticulate, the camera would be constantly moving, or at the very least, they'd always try to find the most interesting angles. So, by comparison, Mega Man Legends' somewhat under-animated cutscenes at first struck me as odd, until I realized that it was almost certainly the intent. Where Metal Gear Solid is clearly inspired by and strives to imitate the cinematography of live-action Hollywood, Mega Man Legends was specifically trying to look like a Sunday morning anime, and this is made apparent in the game's entire graphical aesthetic. That aesthetic is bright, colorful, and deliberately cartoonish. Instead of chasing graphical fidelity or realism, the team leaned into a pseudo-cel-shaded look designed to evoke hand-drawn animation. During gameplay, shading is minimal, but the flat colors pop, the frame rate is stable, and the draw distance is impressive for the time. Mega Man's animations are bouncy and full of life, accentuated by sound effects that make every step, jump, and shot feel tangible. The game even commits to little details like your equipable helmet appearing in cutscenes if you're wearing it, or buster shots visibly changing size and color depending on your stat loadout. It's a level of polish that really sells the cartoon vibe. It really does feel like you're playing an anime. Of course, the game's cheerful surface only tells half the story. The longer you play, the more the sunny exterior of Kattelox Island starts to peel away. Early on, the ruins beneath the island are presented as a kind of dark counterpoint to the cozy, cutesy city life above. The developers even split the work between separate teams, one handling the vibrant surface world, the other designing the eerie underground, to make sure that contrast hit home. Above ground, everything's bright, charming, and welcoming. Below ground, it's all menacing reverbots, oppressive silence, and echoing ambient noise that emphasizes how vast and empty the place is. At first, you explore the island's ruins in chunks, but as the game unfolds, you realize they're all part of one sprawling labyrinth, hinting at the island's larger hidden purpose. Town legends and library books reference a disaster that supposedly recurs every century, with some islanders wondering if Mega Man's arrival and the pirates might be an omen. Even Roll begins to question whether diggers are disturbing something they shouldn't, wondering aloud if the Reaverbots are more sentient and aware than just simple machines guarding treasure. Eventually, you uncover massive subterranean cities guarding ancient keys tied to the island's so-called main gate. And it's in the main gate where Legends drops its biggest narrative bombshells. Mega Man Volnut discovers a dormant Mega Man unit named Juno, a so-called bureaucratic unit tasked with overseeing the island. Juno casually drops that Volnut might not even be of this world, that his origins are extraterrestrial and maybe not especially noble. The island's disaster turns out to be a periodic reinitialization, where the orbital fortress, Eden, wipes out the human population if it feels it's grown too large. And with that, suddenly those suspiciously crater-like coastlines and circular divots on Kattelox don't look so natural anymore. The final hours of Mega Man Legends leave you with a strikingly somber, almost nihilistic undertone. What starts as a cheerful anime-styled adventure slowly morphs into a meditation on apocalypse, extinction, and the ambiguity of Mega Man's very identity. It's way heavier than you'd expect from a game with this art style, but that contrast is exactly what gives it weight. Much like the anime that inspired it, Legends uses whimsy as a disguise for something deeper. If there is one weak spot in the game's set design, though, it's the dungeons. The underground areas may serve the story, but as gameplay environments, they're kinda bland. Just endless stretches of drab brown hallways with minimal variety. Yes, the sameness is explained in the lore, they're all part of one big complex, but that doesn't make them any less visually monotonous. And it doesn't help that the soundtrack is unusually muted for a Mega Man title. The ruins are mostly silent, the town is backed by cheerful but quiet elevator music, and while the Japanese release featured full vocal opening and ending themes to reinforce the anime influence, the English version swapped those out for whatever the hell this is.
In about an hour, we'll be arriving at our destination, Kattelox Island. Double-check your equipment readings and make sure everything's in working order. I swear.
It says something that the most notable tracks in the game are the ones lifted wholesale from classical composers like Bach, Chopin, and Tchaikovsky. Considering Mega Man has always delivered incredible music, Legends is oddly subdued in this department, and that absence is felt. Still, the overall incredible atmosphere of the game's setting wins the day here, and Mega Man Legends is an absolutely wonderful world to immerse yourself in. When Mega Man Legends launched at the tail end of 1997, critical reception was lukewarm, averaging around 75%. Reviewers praised the story, charming setting, decent voice acting, and the wide variety of weapons, but many felt the gameplay wasn't mechanically deep enough to keep veteran players engaged very long. Likewise, the graphics, while serviceable, weren't considered particularly impressive, even at the time. Some critics were harsher than others, particularly on the controls, but most agreed that Legends was a far more competent leap into 3D than other 2D franchises had managed. A few reviewers did spot the potential beneath the surface. Next Generation called it a diamond in the rough. The game eventually received 2 ports, first to the N64 and later to PC, but each subsequent version fared worse than the last, with the PC version tanking critically at a dismal 33%. Sales weren't stellar either. Keiji Inafune later attributed this to the fact that sandbox-style game design simply wasn't mainstream yet. Audiences weren't ready to embrace the type of open-world adventure Legends offered. Fan response was mixed as well. Some Mega Man devotees bristled at the game's radical departure from the classic formula, a predictable reaction whenever a beloved franchise experiments with genre. Think of the divides caused by other games that radically broke the mold, even critically acclaimed ones like Resident Evil 4, or pretty much any Final Fantasy game released since 2006. Inafune has said, Mega Man is a robot, and in terms of a video game, that means he can be or do anything. Inevitably, taking the series in a new direction will stir controversy, but it's often necessary to reach new audiences. Expanding into uncharted territory is precisely what drew me in. Legends was the game that made me revisit the classic Mega Man titles with fresh eyes. Reception to Legends over the years has been a roller coaster. Through the mid to late 2000s, online discourse could be downright brutal. Sites like Screw Attack labeled Mega Man Legends among the top 10 worst 2D to 3D transitions, and some fans also took issue with Mega Man's redesign. Late 2000s gaming discourse in general was kind of insufferable, honestly. Everyone was trying to be the next angry video game nerd, mercilessly tearing into anything they could spin as even a little bit bad. Mega Man and Sonic the Hedgehog in particular seemed to become perennial punching bags during this era. These days, though, the pendulum has swung in the opposite direction. Perhaps a bit too far, if you ask me. After the infamous and heartbreaking last-minute cancellation of Legends 3 back in 2011? Holy was it really that long ago? The Legends series has acquired a kind of martyr status. Fans now sometimes heap uncritical praise on Legends and its sequel in the hope of coaxing Capcom into reconsidering the franchise. The truth, Mega Man Legends is neither a disaster nor a flawless masterpiece. It's fine, it's solid, it's okay. Not the smoothest first attempt at a 3D Mega Man, but in the context of the era, it could have been far, far worse. Even though Legends nails the story and setting, that alone probably isn't enough to keep everyone hooked. The gameplay is admittedly rough around the edges, and there are some design choices that, love the game as I do, I genuinely take issue with. I mean, for Pete's sake, we're talking about a game where you use the shoulder buttons to turn. But on the other hand, Legends was the first Mega Man title in a long time that felt like it was genuinely trying to innovate. It had a built-in lock-on targeting system a year before Ocarina of Time, and real-time in-engine cutscenes with full voice acting a year before Metal Gear Solid. Sure, those games may have done those things better, but Legends did them first, and that deserves some recognition. So why did this Mega Man click with me when so many others didn't? I think it's because Legends doesn't just translate Mega Man into 3D, it reimagines him. It slows things down, emphasizes exploration over precision, and lets its world breathe. Instead of constantly demanding that I get good at brutal action stages, it invited me to poke around, talk to people, and discover at my own pace. It made Mega Man approachable in a way the classic games never did for me, and in doing that, it became the first time I felt like a Mega Man fan. Mega Man Legends isn't perfect. The controls are dated, the weapons are unbalanced, and the combat is consistently uninteresting. But beneath the clunkiness is one of the most charming experiments Capcom ever made. It was ultimately this game's enduring earnestness that won people over through all these years. It's Mega Man, but Zelda. Mega Man, but 3D. Mega Man, but an adventure. And honestly, that was exactly what I needed to finally fall in love with Mega Man.